My fiancé had been bewitched by some vixen from outside. For several consecutive days, he had been lost in a dreamy haze. As soon as classes ended at the academy, he would leave shoulder to shoulder with an ethereal figure in fluttering green robes. I thought he had a change of heart and forced down the bitterness rising in my chest. I prepared to follow them and see exactly what kind of woman she was, but when I drew closer and looked carefully, the person walking beside him was clearly a man. Good heavens, could Erfu actually prefer men? My maidservant blurted out before realizing her slip of the tongue and hastily covering her mouth. Just then, a gust of wind swept past, lifting the thin veil that covered the man's face. Who would have thought that beneath it lay a countenance identical to Fu Yunjian's? The man in green gnashed his teeth in fury. He tore off the veil and seized Fu Yunjian by the collar. "Take a good look, Fu Yunjian. I am your future self. At tomorrow's flower appreciation banquet, do not choose Xiaoning. The one you will truly love in the future is your fellow academy disciple Qin Song, who has been disguising herself as a man." The next day, at the flower appreciation banquet, Fu Yunjian hesitated for a brief moment before he truly presented the betrothal flower branch to Qin Song. In the blink of an eye, I became the laughingstock of every young lady in the capital. Before many days had passed, the family servants escorted me in a small sit-in chair to the villa for recuperation. On the day I set out, the man claiming to be from the future blocked the path in front of the sedan. He smiled triumphantly. "Sister-in-law, how is my performance? Did I manage to fool that foolish brother of mine? Since the two of us look exactly alike anyway, why don't you marry me instead?" I stiffly dug my nails into my palms until all 10 broke, then suddenly burst out laughing. "Enough with the nonsense. Fu Yunjian, open your eyes wide and look carefully. I am you. The you from the future." The two who had just been walking side by side suddenly began arguing. The man in green flew into a rage and forcefully pinned my betrothed, Fu Yunjian, against the wall. He ripped off the veil from his face under Fu Yunjian's astonished gaze and gritted his teeth. "Seen clearly yet. At tomorrow's flower appreciation banquet, do not choose Xiaoning anymore. She is old-fashioned and boring. Even when sharing the same bed in the future, she will be like a dead fish, completely motionless. You will definitely regret marrying her." I was squatting in the corner by the wall, still reeling from the shock of what I had just heard. Hearing those words, a wave of bitterness flooded my heart, and I unconsciously began to wonder, will my future really be unloved by my husband to this extent? "But we are childhood sweethearts, betrothed since we were young," Fu Yunjin murmured in a daze. The man in green sneered coldly and said indifferently, "So you plan to throw your entire life away for the sake of an old betrothal contract? You are the heir apparent of the Marquis of Yong'an's estate, with boundless prospects ahead. Countless young ladies in the capital admire you. Even Qin Song, who will later become a presented scholar, while disguising her gender, secretly loves you. You shouldn't hang yourself on a single withered tree called Xiaoning." Qin Song is indeed very good. Fu Yunjian was lost in thought for a moment before he quickly shook his head. "But Xiaoning hasn't done anything wrong either." "So what? The fact that she doesn't make people's hearts flutter is her crime." The man in green stood up straight and indifferently patted Fu Yunjian on the shoulder. "If you soften your heart now, your future will end up just like mine, forcing yourself to live every day with a woman you don't like, staring at each other in mutual disgusts, spending the rest of your life in regret. Fu Yunjian, will you make the right choice at tomorrow's flower appreciation banquet?" Fu Yunjian offered no further argument. Looking at his expression, which seemed both hesitant and suddenly enlightened, my heart sank straight to the bottom. The affection between Fu Yunjian and me had never reached this level to begin with. Just a few days earlier, he had specially gone half a street out of his way after school to buy pastries for me. He had even secretly climbed over the wall into my courtyard, smiling with full confidence. "Anning, in a few days at the flower appreciation banquet, you must dress up beautifully." He reached out and pinched my flushed cheek, his smile full of teasing. "That will be an important day for the two of us." According to custom this afternoon, before marriage, if a man and woman were interested in each other, they would exchange a flower branch at the flower appreciation banquet as a sign of betrothal. But after secretly overhearing their conversation that day, I had been in a daze for several days straight. Whenever I closed my eyes, Fu Yunjian's hesitant expression would appear in my mind. Therefore, at the flower appreciation banquet, as everyone's eyes turned toward me, I hesitated. "Anning, hurry up and give it. You and the heir apparent have had feelings for each other for so many years. What is there to be shy about?" Several of my close friends among the young ladies teased me. The hand holding the flower branch tightened slightly as I unconsciously glanced toward Fu Yunjian. Instead, I saw him intently gazing at the side profile of a refined fellow disciple, standing nearby, slightly entranced. My throat felt as if something were lodged in it. I quickly withdrew my hand and said softly, "Never mind, today I don't have anyone I wish to give it to, here take it." A large hand with well-defined hand reached out before my eyes. Fu Yunjin's clear voice, carrying a hint of laughter, sounded by my ear. "Didn't you say you would give it to me, little Aning? Why are you going back on your word?" "That's right, Aning. Did you quarrel with the heir apparent and throw a tantrum?" "How could that be? The heir apparent has doted on Miss Xiao, with her good temperament for so many years. How could they quarrel?" "Oh, it's just a lover's quarrel then," one of Fu Yunjian's academy classmates deliberately dragged out his words. Everyone burst into laughter. I gathered my courage and looked up, discovering that Fu Yunjian was gazing at me tenderly. His eyes and voice were exactly the same as before. It seemed he had not been bewitched by that man from yesterday, and clearly still remembered our vow. My nose stung and all the grievances from the past few days surged up at once. Tears flowed out uncontrollably. Fu Yunjian panicked and hurriedly wiped my tears, coaxing gently. "What's wrong? Are you unwell? Or did someone upset you?" Neither. I wiped my tears and handed over the flower branch in my hand, saying sullenly, "Big brother Fu, this is for you." He accepted it without hesitation. "Heir apparent, where is your flower? Hurry and give it to our Aning." Lin Yu could not help teasing as well, but at that moment an untimely cold voice rang out. Women are truly boring." It was Qin Song, the refined fellow disciple who had been standing close to Fu Yunjian earlier, now glared furiously at the flower branch in Fu Yunjian's hand, yet her eyes gradually reddened. Fu Yunjian released it as if it was burned, and the flower branch fell to the ground. While everyone in the courtyard was still stunned by the scene, Fu Yunjian hesitated for a moment, before suddenly picking up another flower branch from the table and walking toward Qin Song. His breathing was rapid, his voice slightly hoarse. "Miss Qin, this flower is for you." "No, Fu Yunjian, what do you mean by this?" Lin Yu spoke up first. Everyone began whispering and discussing among themselves. Their eyes swept toward me vaguely. "If it's not for me, who else should the flower be given to for appreciation?" Fu Yunjian tossed back a sentence and hurriedly chased after the shy and blushing Qin Song as she left. It was only in the latter half of the poetry contest that the two of them returned side by side. Their cheeks flushed pink. I was so embarrassed I could barely sit still. I could only clench my palms tightly, struggling to hold back my tears. The first place prize in the poetry contest was a jade hairpin that looked very much like the one my late mother used to wear. I had come today precisely for that jade hairpin. When the poetry contest began, I took a deep breath, dipped my brush in ink, and pushed aside all distracting thoughts. After the young ladies took turns finishing their poems, several selected academy representatives would judge them. Fu Yunjian was among them. Miss Xiao's poem on the plum blossoms was written beautifully and truly carried the spirit of her grandfather. Indeed, I also think Miss Xiao's poem deserves first place. After the scholars discussed for a moment, they were about to announce that my poem had taken first place. My heart pounded as I looked up at the stage in nervous anticipation. "Wait." Fu Yunjian was in no hurry. He took a sheet of paper from his sleeve. "This is the poem Miss Qin composed in the woods earlier. I think it is even better than all the ones on the table. However, this poetry contest is for young ladies, Qin Song. If you have already disguised yourself as a man to attend the academy with us, you should not participate in the ladies' contest." One scholar from a humble background spoke up in protest, but the moment he met Fu Yunjian's half-smiling, half-indifferent gaze, he fell silent. There was no other reason. Fu Yunjian held the highest status among everyone present today. Everyone fell quiet for a moment, and then they truly pushed Qin Song's poem to the top. I stared blankly at Fu Yunjian on the stage, his arrogant and domineering bearing on full display. A few days ago, when we had shared a box of snacks in the courtyard, he had boasted, "It's only a hairpin, isn't it, with my influence? Even if I have to steal it, I will bring it back for my Aning." Yet now he carefully lifted that very jade hairpin, his face flushed as he pinned it into Qin Song's hair. At that moment, Fu Yunjian glanced down from the stage and happened to meet my reddened eyes. He paused slightly before explaining nonchalantly, "Aning, Qin Song has never worn these things before. She isn't like you, who has lived in luxury since childhood. Don't be so petty." I took a deep breath and spoke word by word. "The heir apparent is using his power to bully others. This humble girl naturally dares not complain." "What do you mean by that? Do you think a song's poem is inferior to yours?" Fu Yunjian frowned. "Since when have you become like this? Aren't you being too arrogant?" I suddenly stood up straight. The emotions I had bottled up for so long finally erupted. "Fu Yunjian, I have always been like this. If you look down on me so much, then why did you accept my flower? Your flower was naturally meant for me. Who else would you give it to?" He spoke as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, his tone full of confusion. "It's only a worthless hairpin. Xiaoning, what exactly are you making a fuss about?" Blood rushed to my head, my vision darkened in waves, and my body swayed. The people beside me hurriedly caught me. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Kinsong remove the jade hairpin and glance at me slowly. Seeing me look over, she raised her hand and hurled it to the ground. Miss Xiao, take a good look. Trash like this, I wouldn't use it even if you gave it to me. That day, the flower appreciation banquet felt like a nightmare to me. After I returned home, my father locked me up on the pretext that I had ruined the family's reputation. Fu Yunjian had abandoned our betrothal and stirred up a scandal with his fellow disciple, yet everyone praised him for being honest and straightforward. When I tried to demand justice for myself, I instead became the joke of the capital. The madams competed to lecture their daughters. Have you seen Miss Xiao? Never learn from her. She couldn't even keep her childhood sweetheart fiancé. Truly useless. My stepmother, who had never liked me, made me kneel in the ancestral hall more and more often. The family has fed and clothed you for so many years. Wasn't it all so you could marry into the Marquise's estate and bring us glory? You can cry, you can beg, but if you ruin this marriage alliance, I will make you regret it. I did not want to see Fu Yunjin again, so I clenched my teeth and refused to yield. By the time I fainted from exhaustion in the ancestral hall once more, in my delirium I heard the voices of Fu Yunjian and Kinsong. The Xiao family doesn't seem to be in any hurry to call a physician. Could Miss Xiao be using her maidservant to stage a pitiful act on purpose? But Anning isn't that kind of person. Fu Yunjian's voice carried a trace of hesitation. People change, Kinsong spoke casually. Just like how I never knew that the famously debauched heir apparent could ride a horse so well. I heard the new batch of horses has arrived. Heir apparent, would you dare to race me? Why wouldn't I? Fyunjin's interest was piqued, and he immediately turned away. Heir apparent, our young miss is truly very ill. Please, won't you take a look? The maidservant refused to give up. She ran over and tugged at Fu Yunjin's sleeve, only to be kicked away fiercely by Kinsong. Kinsong stepped forward, wrapped her arms around Fu Yunjin's arm, and said warily, Brother Yunjin, women from the inner courtyard like her love stirring up trouble for no reason. It was clearly her fault that day. Why should you have to visit her? Just ignore her for a couple of days, and she'll come to her senses on her own. She deliberately raised her voice toward the inside of the hall. If you're sick, go call a physician. Why call for Brother Yunjian? I hate those scheming tricks of you ignorant women the most. Fu Yunjin thought for a moment, then nodded as if he had seen the light. He looked at Kinsong with admiration. You're right. You really are different from all the other young ladies I've met. Before I completely lost consciousness, I heard his voice full of impatience. Tell your young miss that she should reflect on herself first. When this heir apparent is no longer angry, I will naturally come to see her. When I opened my eyes again, I was awakened by the commotion outside the door. The maidservant, who had secretly gone to beg Fu Yunjian for mercy, was now being dragged away by several older servants on the pretext of breaking the rules, and was to be sold off. My stepmother looked at me with a mocking smile. Xiaoning, do you know your mistake now? Facing the maidservant's tearful, pleading gaze, I slowly lowered my head deeply and said with difficulty, your daughter knows her mistake. I will go apologize to the heir apparent right away. Fu Yunjian was not in the residence, so I handed the box in my hands to the gatekeeper and asked him to be sure to deliver it to the heir apparent. The box contained all the little trinkets Fu Yunjian had collected for me over the years, along with a handwritten letter. In my heart I still harbored a faint hope that he might help me one last time for the sake of our many years of affection, but in the end I had never truly understood Fu Yunjian. He said men and women should not touch, and merely had the family send me a reply. Xiaoning, you don't need to use these pitiful tricks anymore. A song is right, I owe you nothing. The more you use these underhanded methods to force me, the more I look down on you. I felt as if I had fallen into an ice cellar. That year on his birthday, when he could not hold back and kissed me on the lips, had that also been me forcing him. On the back of the letter Kinsong had added a large line in red ink, shameless. Miss Xiao, does stealing another woman's man feel that satisfying? The letter was snatched away by my stepmother. After reading it, she laughed coldly, and that very day, led people into my courtyard and had me bundled into a small sedan chair and carried out of the residence. Before I left, my stepmother's cold voice sounded beside my ear. You've become so useless and have ruined the family's reputation. It's inconvenient for the household to keep you any longer. Go stay at the villa for a few months to atone once the scandal dies down. I'll marry you off as the second wife to my nephew outside the family. That was a pit of fire. The first wife of her nephew had clearly been beaten to death while still alive. I struggled desperately, but my hands and feet were still bound, and I was shoved into the sedan. Just when I had fallen into utter despair, I suddenly heard a somewhat familiar voice outside. May I ask if the young lady inside is Miss Xiaoning? The second young master of the Marquis of Yong'an's estate, Fu Sun, has admired you for a long time and has come today especially to ask for your hand. Fu Shun lifted the sedan curtain, revealing a face identical to Fu Yunjin's. He was the man in green from that day, the one who had claimed to be Fu Yunjin from the future. My elder brother and I are twins. Beads of sweat dotted the tip of his nose as he explained, with a touch of embarrassment. When I was young, my mother took me back to the countryside to visit relatives. The boat encountered rough waters on the river, and I was pushed and fell overboard. They probably all thought I had died, which is why no one mentioned me to outsiders all these years. Even my elder brother didn't know. Fu Shun's eyes darkened for a moment before he quickly smiled again. But before I came to propose, I had already reunited with my parents. They feel guilty for not having me by their side all these years, and have allowed me to decide my own marriage. Miss Xiao, I have heard about what happened between you and my elder brother. Since the two of us look exactly alike anyway, would you be willing to marry me? His voice trembled, and he was so nervous he didn't dare meet my eyes. I rubbed my reddened wrists and said hesitantly, "Second young master, actually I met you once before. I saw everything that day. Miss Xiao, please let me explain." At that time, I had just returned to the capital, and hadn't yet dared to acknowledge my family. I heard my twin elder brother was studying at the academy, so I secretly went to watch him a few times. He hesitated. As a result, I saw my elder brother exchanging meaningful glances with Miss Qin several times. I felt it wasn't fair to you, so I made up those words to scare him. I never expected him to actually believe them. No wonder Fu Yunjian had been distracted during that period, and often lost in thought when he came to see me. It turned out his heart had already left long ago, which was why he had accepted those outlandish words so readily. Fu Xin's reason was not particularly clever. Even I had doubted it many times after returning. But Fu Xinjin had believed it immediately and without the slightest suspicion. It was simply because he had been looking for an excuse to justify betraying me. I understood everything, yet I still could not stop my eyes from reddening. Fu Xin panicked and wiped my tears for me. "Miss Xiao, don't cry. I saw the plea for help you sent to my elder brother and rushed over today to save you. If you marry me, I will definitely treat you well." I looked straight into his eyes, those sincere, earnest eyes, and smiled faintly. My marriage is naturally decided by my parents and arranged by a matchmaker. If my mother agrees, then Anning has no objections. My stepmother naturally agreed. She had been furious that I could not climb into the Marquis's estate and secure a position for her own obedient son. Suddenly Fun had delivered himself to her door, and she was overjoyed. Fu Yunjin is the heir apparent, his status is too high, and I was worried about the mismatch. The second young master is just right. He's barely a suitable match for you. The Marquis of Yong'an and his wife were ecstatic to have found their long-lost youngest son. Filled with guilt, they wanted only to make it up to him. When they heard that the betrothal was with me, they hesitated only briefly before agreeing. That year, your mother and I arranged the betrothal for a ding when she was young, but we never specified which son it was for. Now that you have returned and your elder brother says he has no feelings for Miss Yao, we will follow your wishes. When the two families exchanged the betrothal documents, the Marchioness held my hand and sighed. "Anning, I recognized you as my daughter-in-law long ago. It's just that Yunjian was not blessed. Lately he has been running around with his academy friends and causing you to suffer." She wiped her tears. "Thank goodness, a son has come back." I never expected the two brothers to have such similar taste in women. The two families worked in perfect harmony, and my marriage to Fu Xin was quickly put on the agenda. Betrothal gifts and wedding preparations flowed into the residence like water. My stepmother and father were so happy they could barely keep their eyes open. The Marchioness said Fu Xun's fate was delicate, and the ceremony should not be too grand, so they simply sent a letter to Fu Yunjin, who was traveling outside. The wedding was set for 3 months later. During this time, I stayed peacefully at home, embroidering my wedding. Clothed son, arranged by his father, began working at the Ministry of Works. After office hours, he would often come to visit me, each time bringing some novel trinket, a box of fragrant pastries one day, several beautiful hairpins the next. We grew more and more at ease with each other. The wedding date was approaching, and today Fu Xin had invited me to offer incense at Huguo Temple. I never expected to run into Fu Yunjian, who had been away from home for so long. Right here lately, Fu Yunjian had been restless. That day, after leaving Shaolin the letter, he had traveled the mountains and waters with Qinsong, his heart full of joy at having shaken off that clingy nuisance. But once the initial novelty wore off, he found himself frequently thinking of Suning. Spring weather was fickle. The day had started bright and sunny, but before long a vexing drizzle began to fall. He stood under the eaves, Qinsong's stubborn complaints ringing in his ears, while scenes from the past kept flashing through his mind. On days like this, Xiaoning would always wait for him at the academy gate. Before he could even worry, she would timely bring him an oiled paper umbrella. All the academy students wore the same uniform, yet Xiaoning could always spot him in the crowd. No matter when he turned his head, he would meet her gentle, patient smile. There were carriages waiting for her at home. She did not need to go to such trouble every time. He secretly felt pleased, though he pretended not to care on the surface. Xiaoning would only gently wipe the rain from his face, her voice soft. How could it be the same? Everyone else has family to pick them up. I didn't want brother to be alone. That's right. They have been together for so long they are already family. One should naturally be more tolerant toward family. Qin Song's endless complaints still filled his ears. Brother Yunjian, think of something quickly. We were supposed to go boating on the lake today. I don't want it to rain. A wave of disgust suddenly rose in Fu Yunjian's heart. At that moment, he received a letter from home saying that his long-lost younger brother had been found and was preparing to marry. Yunjian secretly frowned. What long-lost younger brother? He had never heard of one. Could anyone with a token claim to be a young master of the Marquise's estate? He laughed coldly, tore the letter to shreds, and suddenly felt an urgent need to return to the capital. I'm only worried my parents are being deceived. I'll take the chance to visit Anang as well. He comforted himself that way. He left in such a hurry that he did not see the line written on the back of the letter. The second young master has just been found and will soon marry Miss Xiao. The day Fu Shun and I went to offer incense was one of the rare clear days. The temple was crowded with worshippers coming and going like a woven tapestry. After offering incense, Fu Shun suggested, we go up the rear mountain to admire the flowers. When we arrived, his eyes suddenly lit up as if he had seen something. Aning, I have something to attend to and will be away for a moment. Will you wait here for me? I agreed cheerfully. While I continued admiring the flowers with my maidservant, a sharp voice suddenly rang out beside me. Xiaoning, what are you doing here? Qin Song glared at me with hostility in her eyes. You knew brother Yunjian was coming to offer incense today, so you deliberately came to run into him by chance. Have you no shame? Enough. Fu Yunjian, standing beside her, suddenly cut her off. He put on a magnanimous expression. Ah Ning, if you want to see this heir apparent, just come openly. Since when have you become so timid? Fu Yunjian reached out to pat my head, his eyes carrying a teasing smile. I dodged his hand, his voice carrying a trace of annoyance. Xiaoning, are you still angry? A song and I went out to enjoy ourselves. It wasn't that we deliberately hid it from you. It's just that you have clung to me since we were children, and over time it became annoying. It's good for us to have some space. Besides, bringing a woman along this time would have been inconvenient. If it were before, I would definitely have asked. Bringing me was inconvenient, but bringing Qin Song was fine. Yet right now my heart remained calm, and my reply was casual. The heir apparent and Miss Qin truly are a match made in heaven. It is only natural for you to travel together. I knew explaining to you would only make you throw another tantrum. Fu Yunjian rarely showed such patience. Little Aning, stop being angry. Haven't you always wanted to ride horses outside the city? I'm free lately and can take you. The heir apparent is joking. I wouldn't dare be angry, and I'm not skilled at riding. You should find someone else. I think Miss Qin would be very suitable. Xiaoning, this is meaningless. Fu Yunjian's voice grew cold, his eyes carrying a warning. Even when throwing a tantrum, you should know your limits. Do you still want to marry into my family or not? Brother Yunjin, I suddenly feel a little unwell. Qin Song stepped forward, timidly tugging at Fu Yunjin's sleeve. Her peach blossom eyes brimmed with tears, truly pitiful to behold. Fu Yunjian asked worriedly, where do you feel unwell? I felt a little off earlier. It must be an allergy to the flower pollen. With that, she went limp and fell into Fu Yunjian's arms. I had no interest in watching this loving drama. I lifted my foot to leave, only to have my sleeve tugged by Qin Song. Sister Xiao, did I anger you again? She peeked out from Fu Yunjian's embrace, looking both aggrieved and innocent. I know you don't like me, but it's getting dark. It wouldn't be safe for you to go back alone. Why don't you come with us? I had no desire to reply and simply refused calmly. No need, I'm waiting for someone. Fu Yunjian had already lifted Qin Song in his arms. Hearing me, he turned back impatiently. Xiaoning, can't you live without throwing tantrums? A song is already like this. Can't you be a little more understanding? I said coldly, my voice completely chilled. I already said I'm not going. Whether you leave or not is up to you. Just don't come crying and begging this heir apparent to see you later. Fu Yunjian tossed the words over his shoulder and hurried away without looking back. My wet nurse had once advised me, once you marry into the Marquis' estate, you will all be one family. When you look up you see him, when you look down you see him. Young miss, just bear with him a little longer. I waited a while longer, but Fu Sun still had not returned. Seeing the sky growing darker, I instructed the people beside me, Leave a horse for the second young master. We'll return to the residence first. Unexpectedly, on the way back a heavy rain began to fall, and the carriage became stuck in the mud. While the maids and older servants panicked and spun in circles, a carriage bearing the Marquis's insignia slowly approached. Chinsong lifted the curtain, revealing her fair, rosy, beautiful face, without the slightest trace of illness. The moment she saw me, she spoke hurriedly. "Miss Xiao, I didn't mean to ride back with Brother Yunjian. Don't be angry, I'll give my seat to you." Her tone was urgent, yet she sat firmly in place without moving an inch. Fu Yunjian pulled her back with one hand. "Ah, Song, sit still. Who does she think she is that everyone has to yield to her?" He shot me a mocking glance. "Ah, Song is only riding in my carriage because she isn't feeling well. Miss Xiao, must you get angry, even over something like this?" I ignored him and lowered the curtain. Fu Yunjin was so furious, he nearly laughed. He raised his voice. "Some people should know their limits. If you truly anger this heir apparent, we'll see who teaches you to ride a horse then." "Miss, when did you ever say you wanted to go riding?" the young maidservant muttered softly. "Ignore him. The person sent to deliver the message should be back soon." I closed my eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. The messenger did not only bring help, he also brought Fushun, who had yet to return. "Ning, it's all my fault for being late. When I got back to the rear mountain, you had already left." As soon as he boarded the carriage, he apologized to me profusely. Even when he escorted me to my door, his face was still full of remorse. He could not bear to let me get down. This time, it was my poor planning that ruined our hard-won meeting. "In a few days, I'll invite you out again. You mustn't refuse, all right." Ning, I could only agree. Who would have thought that a few days later, invitations from both Fu Shen and Fu Yunjian would arrive at the same time? Without thinking, I tossed Fu Yunjian's invitation aside. After I finished dressing and stepped out the door, I ran straight into Fu Yunjian's entourage. The moment he saw me, Fu Yunjian could not hold back his mocking words. Some people talk a good game, but the moment they hear this heir is going hunting outside the city, they rush to follow. Only this time, I won't be so easy to pacify. When this heir gets angry, not just anyone can coax him." Kinsong sat on her horse pretending to be kind as she reminded me, "Miss Xiao, be careful. This horse has a fierce temper. It's not suitable for young ladies. You don't have to force yourself just to accommodate us. Why don't you ride in the carriage instead?" I looked at the group blocking the gate and felt a surge of irritation. Today, Fu Shin had invited me to the hot spring villa to recuperate. The roads near the villa were narrow, making a carriage inconvenient, so I had deliberately changed into riding clothes. When I left, I had not expected it to cause yet another misunderstanding. Chinsong continued her fake kindness. "You really don't have to push yourself." I lifted my skirt and mounted the horse with crisp, decisive movements. Fu Yunjian's eyes showed unconcealed amazement as he looked at me. "Ning, how come I never knew you could ride?" Of course I could ride. When I was 3 years old, my grandfather had taught me himself. It was only because Fu Yunjian preferred gentle, docile girls that I had never been allowed to do such things. Now that I was betrothed, no one in the residence controlled me anymore, and I was freer than ever on the road. Fu Yunjian kept riding beside me as if by accident. "Ning, when we were young, we often sneaked out to play like this. Back then I would climb the wall and take you to pick fruit. We picked so many wildflowers too." His voice carried a trace of nostalgia. Kinsong glared at me with unwilling resentment, as if I had stolen some precious treasure from her, which only irritated me even more. Fortunately, we soon reached a fork in the road. I breathed a sigh of relief, cracked my whip decisively, and broke away from them. "What are you doing?" Fu Yunjian had not yet reacted. "That was not the road to the outskirts. Little Ning, you've gone the wrong way. I knew you couldn't bear to leave me. You can't even remember the road." Seeing that I ignored him, Fu Yunjin grew anxious and urged his horse forward to block my path. "Xiaoning, what exactly do you want?" I took a deep breath. "Fu Yunjin, you are truly annoying. When did I ever say I wanted to go riding in the outskirts? From beginning to end, you made that up all by yourself. Besides, our betrothal has already been dissolved. Could you please stay away from me?" With that, I refused to look at his stunned expression any longer. I guided my horse around his and galloped off. Even after I had ridden quite a distance, I could still hear Fu Yunjin's furious voice rising behind me. Fine, let her go. If she dies, it has nothing to do with me. When has this heir apparent ever had a betrothal with such an unreasonable woman? If I marry, I will marry someone free and unrestrained like Kinsong. Fu Shun was waiting for me on the small path ahead. When he saw me in my close-fitting riding outfit, his eyes brightened. "Ning, I specially found a wonderful place for you to recuperate. Later you must soak for a good long while." I agreed happily. I really did need to take excellent care of myself. I wanted to make sure that once I married him, I could become pregnant as soon as possible, ideally on the first try. The trip to the hot spring villa that day went extremely smoothly. On the way back, however, I heard that Kinsong's horse had been startled during the hunt. Fu Yunjian had broken his leg while saving her and was currently recuperating at a nearby villa. In the blink of an eye, the day of my wedding to Fushun arrived. The procession stretched for 10 miles in a grand display of red silk and splendor. But when the bridal sedan had traveled only halfway, Fu Yunjian's voice called out from afar, "Second brother, I was recuperating at the villa a few days ago and didn't have the chance to see you. Today is your wedding day, so as your elder brother, I simply must return to drink a toast in celebration." His voice suddenly cut off the moment he saw Fushun. "It's you." Shock and fury warred on his face. Fun smiled warmly instead. Little brother was mischievous that day and only played a small joke on elder brother. "I hope you will be magnanimous on the occasion of my wedding and let the matter pass." He sat straight on his horse and offered a respectful salute with clasped hands. Fu Yunjian's face turned deathly pale. "So the things you said that day about Qinsong and me being a match made in heaven were all lies to trick me. Qinsong?" Fushun looked puzzled for a moment before understanding dawned. "Those were just words I made up on the spot." "And you actually believed them?" Fu Yunjin was both furious and humiliated. In the end, his attendants had to persuade him repeatedly before he finally gritted his teeth and stepped aside. The sound of festive music rang out as the bridal sedan, accompanied by drums and gongs, entered the Marquis' estate in lively triumph. Fusun led me to perform the wedding bows. We were only halfway through when Fu Yunjian lifted the curtain and stormed into the main hall, his face darkening as he sat to one side. His eyes burned with rage as he stared fixedly at Fushun. The old Marquis' expression turned ugly. He glared at his eldest son several times and hissed in a low voice, "Today is your younger brother's great happy occasion. Control yourself." Only then did Fu Yunjian reluctantly tear his gaze away. After the bows were completed, Fun led me into the bridal chamber. He was just about to lift the red veil with the ceremonial scale when a noisy crowd of relatives and friends poured in from outside. "We have long heard that Miss Xiao is dignified and refined. Come, son, lift the veil so we can all have a look." Fu Yunjian had just stepped into the room and heard the words. He could not help frowning tightly, a foreboding feeling rising in his chest. Right after that, Fuan steadily lifted the red veil. I raised my head. Fu Yunjian happened to look down at the same moment our eyes met, and his face turned deathly white in an instant. "Xiaoning, why is it you?" By the time the Marquis and Marchioness rushed over after hearing the news, the bridal chamber had already descended into chaos. Fu Yunjian, who had been dragged away after throwing a fierce punch at Fu Shen, was still roaring. "You deliberately tricked me just so you could marry Xiaoning yourself, didn't you?" His official hat sat askew as he glared at me with bloodshot eyes and shouted, "Aning, don't marry him, he is a despicable scoundrel. We were both deceived by him." Some guests stepped forward to mediate, while others whispered among themselves in heated discussion. The old Marquis arrived and hurriedly ordered the guests escorted out, then apologized and soothed everyone one by one. Out of respect for him, the uproar finally ended in haste. Immediately afterward, a resounding slap landed across Fujian's face. "You beast!" the old Marquis bellowed. "Your younger brother is getting married, yet you haven't returned home for months. The moment you come back, you cause such a huge scene. Kneel down." Fu Yunjian refused to kneel. "Father-mother clearly knew Aning and I had a childhood betrothal. Why did you marry her to second brother? You are playing favorites." The Marchioness wiped her tears with a handkerchief. "It was you who said you already had someone else in your heart. That is why we let your younger brother have this marriage alliance. We were clearly helping you. How can you blame us?" Fu Shun immediately understood the cue and stepped forward to support the Marchioness. "Your son is fine. It must be that the letter that day was not explained clearly to elder brother." Fu Yunjian froze. What letter? How could I know? He suddenly remembered the family letter from that rainy day. At the time, Kinsong's had been whispering in his ear, leaving him irritable and distracted. He had only glanced at it before tearing it up. "No, you deliberately wrote it on the back. This was all intentional on your part. Otherwise, why have you been home for so long and I never once saw you? You've been associating with those worthless people outside and dare to speak such nonsense." The old Marquis's beard trembled with rage. "Why aren't you dragging him away yet?" A group of servants immediately rushed forward and forcibly hauled Fu Yunjian off in the bridal chamber. The dragon and phoenix candles had already burned halfway down. I held the fire evasion picture, a Spring Palace manual, that the Marchioness had hastily handed me before leaving, feeling a touch of embarrassment. Fu Shen's face was flushed as he looked at me. "My lady, perhaps we should rest," I sighed and beckoned to him. "Come here, husband. Does it hurt where you were hit? Let me apply medicine for you." I took a bit of ointment on my fingertip, moved closer, and carefully dabbed it onto his face. Susun stiffened, unsure where to put his hands. When I looked up again, he hastily lowered his head. Our position was far too intimate, our breaths tangled together, one hurried, one slow. Neither of us knew whose heartbeat faltered first. Fusun bent his head lower. His thick hair mingled with mine, becoming hopelessly tangled. The red silk canopy was lowered. The medicine I had just applied to his face was soon smeared across mine as well. The next day, my entire body ached as I went to pay my respects to my parents-in-law. Fusun looked a little guilty and kept rubbing his nose. The whole way there, he matched his steps to mine. When we arrived, the whole family was already seated properly. Even Fujian, who had been beaten the night before, sat to one side with a gloomy expression. His hand gripped the back of his chair so tightly that it left faint scratches. He stared at me without blinking, his gaze unreadable. After I finished greeting my parents-in-law and elders and withdrew with a pile of gifts, Fu Yunjian chased after me as expected. He blocked my path beside a decorative rockery, his voice filled with sorrow as he called my name. Ning. I retreated a few steps without changing expression. You should call me sister-in-law, heir apparent. After so many years of affection between us, do you truly want to treat me like a stranger? We have only known each other for a few days, he said angrily, stepping closer and grabbing my sleeve. He lowered his voice to explain. At the time I was truly deceived by that despicable Fushun. He said our future together would be unhappy, and he claimed my true love was Qin Song. I listened to those words and grew distant toward you for a while, giving him the chance to slip in. But during the hunt in the outskirts that day, I finally understood. When Qin Song's horse was startled, her first reaction was to drag me down with her. My heart turned cold in that moment. I remembered when we were children climbing trees. I nearly fell, and even though you were terrified, you still risked your life to hold me tight and refused to let go. In that instant I realized the only person I have truly loved all these years is you. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. I planned to tell you after I returned, but I was recuperating for months and you never once came to visit me. I was angry with you and deliberately stayed away from the estate, wanting you to lower your head first. In the end, things turned out like this. Ning, I regret it. I glanced around to make sure no one was nearby, then quickly pulled my sleeve from his grasp. My voice was cold. Heir apparent, watch your words, I am already married. What is the point of saying these things now? Of course there is a point. A strange light flashed in Fu Yunjian's bloodshot eyes. I thought about it all night and finally understood. Father has arranged for Fun to take charge of the 5 cities' military commandery. He has been very busy lately. Since he and I look exactly alike on the days he is not in the estate, I can take his place and look after you. Have you lost your mind? I am not crazy. Fu Yunjian's expression turned manic as he gripped me tightly. Ning, listen to me, I have already inquired. Tonight, Fushun happens to be away from the estate. I can wear his clothes and come to your room. Hump! A cold laugh cut him off at exactly the right moment. I'm afraid I must disappoint you, elder brother. Fusun stepped out from behind the rockery with a smile that did not reach his eyes. His thin lips uttered a few calm words. I am here tonight. Fushun was a little like a bird, startled by a bowstring after that. He asked for leave from his superiors and, right after the wedding, took me to stay at the hot spring villa without resting. Once there, he repeatedly instructed the guards at the gate not to let anyone who looked like him inside. In the middle of the hot spring pool, the warm water rippled in gentle waves. Fu's movements were slow and unhurried. Even after we finished, he refused to let me go. Instead, he leaned close to my ear, his voice puzzled. My lady, you truly make a man fall in love. I weakly clung to the edge of the pool, watching his reflection shimmer beneath the water. Fusun lifted my chin. His eyes were slightly red as he looked at me and called my name. I answered softly. The hot spring water surged and churned all night, only calming with reluctance as dawn approached. My limbs were limp as Fusun carried me to the bed. Before I drifted off into a hazy sleep, I still remembered to touch my belly and murmur. This time I must be pregnant. 2 months later, I was indeed confirmed pregnant. The moment the news spread, the entire Marquis' estate rejoiced. Even Fu Yunjian asked for leave from the academy and rushed home. This year he was set to graduate from the Imperial Academy. He had abandoned the military foundation of the Marquis' estate and was preparing to take the imperial examinations to become an official. The old Marquis and Marchioness were both delighted and regretful. The 2 brothers, one literary, one martial, should have complemented each other perfectly, yet they had never gotten along. My mother-in-law worried and came to speak with me several times. A son was lost for many years. Now that he has returned to the estate, we cannot help showing him some favoritism. Whether it is marriage or future prospects, we have let him choose first. By the time we realized, Yunjian had already refused any more help from the family. He is also a child we poured our hearts into raising for years. Now that he has grown so distant from us, my heart is not at ease either. Ning, when you have time, help me persuade him. Persuade him? My mother-in-law really was too naive. As we spoke, Fu Yunjin returned, travel-worn and exhausted. He stared fixedly at my belly, which had not yet begun to show, and his eyes suddenly reddened. "I am simply happy at the thought of soon becoming an uncle," he said. My mother-in-law sighed. "If you are so happy, then go have a child of your own. I have told you countless times that your marriage cannot be delayed any longer. How can the younger brother marry before the elder?" Fu Yunjin laughed coldly. "Does this family still have any rules left?" That night he knocked on my door. When I saw him wearing Fushun's stolen clothes, I was startled. He smiled darkly. "Do I look like him? I came all the way here and no one noticed." He naturally pulled me over to sit on the edge of the bed, his hand stroking my belly as he called me wife in a gloomy voice. I blocked his hand and looked at his increasingly twisted expression, feeling a trace of pity in my heart. "I never noticed before that you liked me this much. Fu Yunjian, why are you so obsessed now? People only learn to cherish something after they have lost it." He sighed, then gritted his teeth. "Especially something that originally belonged to me, only to be stolen by the person I hate most. That feeling gnaws at my bones and marrow. Ning, I swear, I will not rest until I win you back." At that exact moment, the door to the room was kicked open with a crash. Fusun stood outside holding a blade, smiling gently. "Fu Yunjian, get out here." The two of them began fighting right in my courtyard. At first, they still held back, but as old grudges and new hatred surged, they truly started fighting without mercy. Fortunately, I had already ordered the maids and older servants to leave the courtyard. I leaned against the doorframe and watched for a long time, always feeling that Fushun was no match for Fu Yunjin. After all, he had grown up in the countryside and learned martial arts on his own. How could he compare to Fu Yunjin, who had trained in the military camp under the Marquis since childhood? At that thought, Fusun's expression turned ferocious, and his movements grew increasingly vicious. Fu Yunjian had long wanted to teach him a lesson and naturally refused to yield. In the chaos, someone kicked over the stone flower stand in the corner of the courtyard. The upper tier lost its balance and collapsed with a crash. In that split-second moment of life and death, I did not hesitate. I threw myself toward Fusun and pulled him out of the way. Fu Yunjin, however, was struck squarely on the head by a heavy porcelain pot planted with a pine tree. In the blink of an eye, dust flew everywhere. He stood motionless amid the mess as blood slowly trickled from his temple. "Are you all right?" I asked belatedly, just to be polite. Fu Yunjin only stared at the way my hand, tightly clasped. Fu Yun's blood flowed down from his hair as he slowly broke into a smile, revealing white teeth that looked eerie in the gloom. "I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine." He laughed as he walked away. I pulled Fu Sun into the room. The moment we entered, I anxiously checked him for injuries. "Are you hurt anywhere?" He did not answer, only stared at me in a daze. From that moment on, he seemed frozen in place, unmoving, letting me do as I pleased. It was only when I reached to untie his clothes that he hurriedly caught my hand. "Now is not the time for that. I have something to say." After speaking, he fell silent again. I thought he had been hit on the head and was about to call for a physician when Fusun finally spoke. "Xiaoning, do you know? From childhood until now, no one has ever chosen me." Once the first sentence was out, the rest flowed smoothly. When I fell into the river as a child, I was actually already 3 years old and had begun to remember things vaguely. The waves were huge that day. The wet nurse watching us fell overboard, and both my brother and I fell from the boat. Our parents rushed over but only managed to grab my brother's hand. I was swept away by a wave. Fortunately, one of our loyal family guards had also fallen into the water. He risked his life to pull me ashore, but he himself died without even leaving his name behind. "How did you survive?" I looked at him with gentle pity. A moment later, he averted his gaze uncomfortably. "I was picked up by a farming family. They happened to be unable to have children and treated me as a gift from heaven, raising me as their own. When I was 6, they finally had a son of their own." Fushun suddenly threw himself into my arms, burying his head in the crook of my neck. His voice was muffled and aggrieved. "Ning, I suffered a lot when I was young. Love me a little more." Before I could recover from his story, he bent down and kissed my eyelids, then took my hand and slowly guided it downward. "I'm pregnant now. It's not very convenient. It's fine." "I know what to do," Fun coaxed me in a husky voice. After a moment's hesitation, his cheeks flushed red as he sank into it. By the time the new year arrived, I was already 8 months pregnant and moved even more slowly. Fushun had grown busier as well, yet no matter how late he returned, he would always come to my room to check on me. Sometimes he would gently embrace me with a light laugh. Even if we did nothing, he could sleep peacefully through the night. Before leaving, he never forgot to kiss me softly on the forehead. "Ning, it has been unstable outside lately. Go out less often," I murmured in my sleep. But when I woke and thought over his words, a trace of unease settled in my heart. The atmosphere outside had indeed grown strange recently. The end of the year should have been a time of bustling prosperity, yet troops were frequently mobilized in the capital. It was said that the emperor's health was failing. My mother-in-law, however, remained remarkably clear-headed and analyzed the situation for me in detail. The crown prince has not yet been established. The various factions are bound to grow restless. If we had known earlier, we should not have let Yunjian join the second prince's estate. In the 6th month of that year, Fuyunjin was appointed by the Ministry of Personnel as an aide to the second prince. With the situation now tense, he had not returned home for several months. My mother-in-law could not help worrying. Thinking of him left me uneasy as well. Ever since the day he had left my courtyard with blood on his temple, his behavior had grown increasingly erratic. After joining the second prince, he had offered several strategies that vaguely targeted the 5 cities' military commandery, more precisely, targeted Fushun. At the beginning of the 1st month, the situation suddenly worsened. Fuzian did not return home for several days in a row. Instead, Fuzian, whom we had not seen in a long time, suddenly appeared. He still came to my courtyard. This time he was not wearing Fushun's clothes, yet no one dared stop him. A squad of armored guards followed behind him. My father-in-law was ill. Fuyunjin poured himself a cup of tea, his expression calm. You must have angered her again. I supported my belly and sat down slowly. The Marquis of Yong'an once held military power in the northwest and has never taken sides by openly joining the second prince. Aren't you putting yourself on the fire to be roasted? He laughed with hidden meaning. But a man must establish achievements and a career after all. The Marquis of Yong'an is a tall tree that catches the wind. It is impossible to remain neutral. Rather than waiting to be purged once the situation stabilizes, it is better to choose a side wisely from the start. Besides, do you really think your Fushun is innocent? The 5 cities' military commandery he controls is within the sphere of the 5th prince's influence. Wouldn't the two of you end up opposing each other? I sighed, and slowly took a sip of tea. Wasn't that already decided from the beginning? With a younger brother so full of ambition, who could pretend to be deaf and blind? The Marquis's estate has never been able to support 2 masters. Fu Yunjian gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his voice soft. Ah, Ning, for so many years the only person I could speak my true feelings to has been you. I felt a surge of irritation and brushed his hand away. This is a matter between men, you should not always use me as an excuse. He raised an eyebrow, looking surprised. An excuse? If Fushun does not die, how can I inherit both households? His words infuriated me so much that I went into labor that very night. Fortunately, the birthing room and midwives had been prepared long ago. As I was carried inside, my mother-in-law was still arguing with Fu Yunjian. This is your sister-in-law's courtyard. She is giving birth. What are you doing here? My younger brother is not here, so of course I should take his place and look after her a little. My mother-in-law slapped him hard across the face. You dare speak such shameless nonsense? Do you really think I am a fool? Wave after wave of pain crashed over me. Amid the midwife's urgent instructions, the commotion outside the courtyard gradually grew faint. In my delirium, I seemed to hear the clash of armored guards' weapons, followed by the old Marcus' voice booming like a great bell. You beast! Then came a heart-wrenching cry of pain. Accompanied by the sound of a newborn's wail, I exhausted the last of my strength and finally sank into a deep sleep. When I opened my eyes again, Fuzin was keeping watch beside the bed, gripping my hand tightly. He wore a full suit of blood-stained golden armor. His eyes were bloodshot, his chin covered in stubble, as if he had not rested in a long time. I moved my fingers slightly. Sun immediately leaned down, looking at me with intense worry. Ning, you're awake. You slept very lightly last night. Several times I couldn't hear your breathing, and I almost thought he could not finish. He turned his face away in embarrassment, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. What happened to the Marquis's estate? I gently squeezed his hand. Everything is settled now. The second prince had taken advantage of the emperor's grave illness to plot a rebellion. Chaos reigned outside for an entire night, but it had been quelled. My father-in-law had acted with righteousness and escorted my elder brother to the Golden Throne Hall to plead guilty. In consideration of his past merits and our contribution to suppressing the rebellion this time, His Majesty only stripped the heir apparent title and sentenced him to exile. My father-in-law had petitioned for me to be named the new heir apparent. After he finished speaking, he watched my eyes carefully for my reaction. I smiled weakly. It's a good thing you did not join the 5th prince. In the future, our child will also be the heir apparent. I had given birth to a son, the eldest grandson of the Marquis's estate. The old Marquis personally chose the name Jining, meaning to gather the troops, bring peace to the realm, and ensure the country flourishes and the people live in harmony. That night, it turned out the emperor's critical condition had only been a smokescreen. He had used the opportunity to uproot the unstable princes and purge the court. Fortunately, my father-in-law and husband had stood firmly on the emperor's side from beginning to end. Not only did the Marquis of Yong'an retain its glory, its power actually increased another level after the rebellion was suppressed. On the day Fu Yunjian was sent into exile, I did not go to see him off. I had only recently completed my month of postpartum confinement, and Fu Jun had kept me thoroughly occupied the entire night. The next day, I could not even get out of bed. The day you gave birth, you lost consciousness for a moment. Fu Yunjian panicked so badly he pounded on the door, shouting for the midwives to save the mother. Did anyone ask where he was? Fu Shun hugged me tightly from behind, his voice full of bitterness. He really was devoted to you. I yawned tiredly. He probably just hated you, that's all. What use is hating me in the end? Didn't I still win? He held me silently and we fell asleep again. The day of Fu Yunjian's exile passed in that slumber. Only my mother-in-law accompanied him all the way to the city outskirts with his luggage. When she returned, her face was drenched in tears. A mother always has to plan for her children. Afterward, she often recounted the scene to me. Every time she reached the painful parts, she could not help covering her face and weeping. I, however, would secretly curl the corners of my lips when she wasn't looking. I suppose I am still a vengeful person after all. I could never forget the terror of nearly being sent to the villa that year, nor the despair of standing outside the Marquis's estate, begging again and again without ever being allowed to meet him. But the people one should hate are never limited to just one. By the time Jining was 6 years old, he already showed a few traces of steady maturity, despite his young age. Before my father-in-law passed away, he held the boy's hand and repeatedly instructed Fusun to raise him well. One bowl of water can never be perfectly level on his deathbed. He finally understood in a haze the reason for the fraternal strife years earlier, because he had let go of his youngest son to save the eldest, then overcompensated out of guilt, causing the eldest to live in constant fear of losing his position as heir apparent. After I am gone, you must immediately petition to name Jing the heir apparent. With those words, he passed away. The following year, Fusun also died to the outside world. I claimed it was a recurrence of an old injury. Over the years, Fusun had fought in campaigns everywhere. Rising steadily in rank, Marquis' estate had become a powder keg, ready to explode one more step and it would be beyond redemption. A mother always has to plan for her children. On the day he died, I sat quietly beside his sickbed. Zun looked at the bowl of medicine I brought him. He seemed to understand, yet could not quite believe it. Why? His eyes reddened. I gently stirred the spoon and said calmly, when one is in a position of weakness, one has no right to ask why. That year, a few words from you nearly ruined my entire life. Did I ever ask why? Fusun, the first time we actually met was on the street. A carriage had lost control, and I pushed Fu Yunjian aside without hesitation. That day on the street corner I saw you, your eyes were filled with jealousy and unwillingness. His breathing suddenly grew rapid. I ignored it and continued on my own. At that moment you must have been thinking, why? Why do we share the same origin and the same face? Yet you are the one repeatedly abandoned, while someone always stands in front of Fu Yunjian to shield him. That is why you went to the academy and made up those lies to trick him. Perhaps you simply could not stand how devoted I was to him. But you didn't know that if I had gone out with him and let him get hurt, what awaited me would have been an even harsher punishment. A tear slowly rolled down the corner of his eye. He struggled to lift his hand, wanting to grasp mine. I was wrong, but I changed afterward. Aning, everything I did for you later was sincere. He stared into my eyes, each word spoken with desperate tenderness. I truly love you, but you are nothing special. You are exactly like every despicable man I have ever met. I fed him the medicine spoonful by spoonful, remembering the beginning. Do you recall? You casually said that Xiaoning was like a dead fish in bed, completely motionless. Who would use such vicious words to describe an unmarried young lady? No matter what you did later, it could never change that fact. You are despicable, and I have hated you for a long time. My hand moved more and more roughly. Fusun choked and coughed violently. I pretended not to notice and continued pouring the medicine down. You stayed away from the estate for so long on purpose, avoiding Fujinj, all so you could deliver him a heavy blow on his wedding day. You didn't care at all what gossip a new bride like me would have to endure. I was nothing but a pawn for you to take revenge on him, and naturally an excuse for him to attack you. You two brothers truly are birds of a feather. The hot spring villa was also one of the traps you deliberately set. You wanted to see me humiliated, or to use his flaws to highlight your own perfection, making me devoted to you alone. You also wanted me to risk my life for you in a moment of crisis. Afterward, when I finally did as you wished and shielded you, you wagged your tail like a dog and came running to me. But did you ever think at that time I was pregnant? Why would there be such a tall stone flower stand in a pregnant woman's courtyard? Fusun's eyes widened in disbelief as he struggled violently. I slowly fed him the last spoonful of medicine and gave him one final piece of information. The day the second prince plotted his rebellion, I was the one who noticed Fu Yunjian's suspicious movements and reported their plan to my father-in-law. That is why the two of you were able to suppress the rebellion so smoothly. I looked at him, yet it was as if I were looking through him at someone else. I sighed softly. After knowing each other for so many years, the place where he hid his things had never changed, but Fu Yunjian had to die. If for no other reason, the position of heir apparent had to end up in my son's hands. I carefully traced the lines of Fu Shen's face-identical eyebrows and eyes, until his struggles gradually weakened, until his breathing slowly steadied. Fu Sun died in the year the new emperor favored him most. That year he had just achieved a glorious military victory, and had not yet reached the point where the bow is put away once the birds are gone. Instead, he helped the new emperor reclaim military power, and rewards poured into the marquis's estate like a tide. My mother-in-law and I no longer had warm husbands who knew how to breathe. All we had left was cold money enough to spend for several lifetimes. My son became the marquis. I was granted the title of first-rank imperial mandate. My own father shamelessly claimed every day to be the maternal grandfather of the Marquis of Yong'an. I still could not swallow the anger from years ago and still had to pave the way for my son, so I found an excuse to send him to manage an epidemic. Sure enough, he died at his post fine. I have always been one to remember grudges. After he died, I sent my stepmother to the villa for recuperation. The strictest old maids were assigned to watch her, and she was made to kneel for 2 full hours every day. One day while I was out, I ran into Qin Song on the street. She was well past marriageable age and still unmarried, lingering at the academy and carrying on ambiguously with her fellow disciples. I suddenly understood her parents' bitter dilemma. Her background was not high. If she stayed home waiting for a match, she would probably be hastily married off. By remaining at the academy, she could at least come into contact with many sons of noble houses. This time her target was a young lady standing in front of the academy gate, holding an umbrella. The girl was drenched by the pouring rain, shivering all over. Qin Song, however, leaned against a man's chest, her eyes full of triumph. I did not stop them. I halted my carriage and watched leisurely, but the moment she opened her mouth again, "I hate women like you who cry and make a fuss the most," I gave the order to strip her. "You always talk about women like you. I have long been curious about your own gender." Her outer robe was torn off and thrown into the middle of the street. I have never shown mercy to people like her, nor have I ever felt the slightest guilt. Otherwise, how could I have deserved the blood and tears I shed that year, while struggling like worthless grass? I called the drenched young lady into my carriage and pointed at the man cowering beside her. "Marriage is a woman's greatest affair. If you still have a choice, you should look more carefully before deciding whether to choose him or not." That year I may not have had a choice, or perhaps I did. But the restless blood in my bones was boiling, and the rebellious nature inside me was roaring, so I stepped onto this path without hesitation. The road ahead may be full of thorns, but there is no need to fear. No matter how difficult the journey, turn blood and tears into a sharp blade.